This thing you are viewing this video on is called YouTube, and is the most used video watching provider in the world. Its main purpose? Gaming videos, at least nowadays. Gaming has grown into a huge cultural phenomenon within the last 40 years. And it really has an interesting story. To be a true gamer, you gotta understand its history. Get ready for a history lesson, a lesson that won't make you fall asleep. And get ready for the history of video games. The rubble of the video game market in North America was not pretty. The word video game was viewed as almost cynical. No stores would take in video games, because simply, nobody would buy them. Atari, really in the long run, had been a disaster in disguise. It screwed everything up. It was ruined. The stock for most video game companies went red, bankrupt. Well, in America at least. In Japan, well, those rice and noodle slurping punks were in a golden age of video games. Most people say that the age is still in Japan to this day. Anyways, Japanese companies all wanted to get a hold of American markets, since most companies, other than Activision, makers of cult phenomena Call of Duty, were gone. We say the Sega SG-1000 by Sega tried to revitalize the American markets, but that flopped. We took the clever trick of one company and their extremely innovative game designer to bring the video games back to the Western world. And they go by Nintendo. Meet Rob, or Robotic Operating Buddy. This was sold to consumers as a toy, when really it was a cleverly hidden video game console. Rob was bundled with Nintendo's console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, or hell, even NES. This way, consumers would buy it, thinking that it was a toy rather than a video game, since they were still considered black magic. They sold it to New York toy stores to test to see if it would sell. Surprisingly, it worked, and eventually the Nintendo Entertainment System was shipped nationally. Eventually, Rob would be scrapped, because let's face it, he sucked. But when you look back and appreciate why you have your precious games today, well, you gotta thank Rob. Once the NES went national, Rob was replaced as a bundle with another game. Innovator to the stars, Shigeru Miyamoto's Super Mario Bros. Miyamoto was the genius responsible for the Donkey Kong arcade title that really brought Nintendo into the video game market. And now, the iconic Jumpman from Donkey Kong will get his own fleshed out game. Not to sound too brash, but Mario will become the video games what Mickey Mouse will become the cartoons. Super Mario Bros. Was the #1 selling game of all time, up until it was beaten by yet another Miyamoto title, Wii Sports. Nintendo had an answer to the overuse of crap in the video game industry with the Nintendo seal of approval. Only games that were accepted by Nintendo and given this seal would get permission to make it games for the console. While this didn't cut down the bad games, it also turned Nintendo into the company it is today, with hardly any third-party support whatsoever. Hit games on this platform included Super Mario Bros. 1 and 3, I'm not going to count 2, because let's be honest, it's not even really a game, it's a Mario game, Contra, Mega Man, The Legend of Zelda, and Kid Icarus, or Icarius, I really don't care, I'm just YOLO, you know what I'm saying, among others. The NES would last from 1985 to 1995, 10 whole years. On top of that, the NES's Japanese counterpart, the Famicom, went from 1983 to 2003. 20 whole years before this console was discontinued. That means that people were still buying it for 20 years. People still wanted it. Talk about the gold standard of video games right there. Sega tried once again to make it in American markets with the Sega Master System, and while it did pretty well in foreign countries, in the US, it didn't do as hot. Sega had one last chance to make an impression on American gamers, and they were going to have to push its competitors to the limits to do so. And Atari? Well, they went through numerous foreclosures and bankruptcies and management changes, and were struggling. They were. They were now living in a new shadow. The shadow of the savior of video games. The shadow of Nintendo. On the next episode of the History of Video Games, Sega Strikes Back. and tries to take Nintendo over as king. And the era of portable gaming begins.
On a rescue mission to save our city.